We are growing to be the largest cultivator of seaweed in North America.
It's a great consumer product, it's a tasty, nutritious food, and it brings opportunity to coastal communities and First Nations that want to participate in the industry.
We're coming to market with various forms of seaweed, from seaweed jerky through fresh salad.
We had to learn how to expand from 1 hectare to 5 hectares to 20 hectares. The First Nations have millennia working on the sea and in the water. They have a passion to ensure that what takes place in the ocean leaves it in a better state than it was when it was found. So they're a natural partner for us. We wanted to expand the consumer's acceptance of seaweed into an everyday, healthy, and tasty choice.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Yes. Yeah, you are doing very interesting stuff in Canada, right?
Yes, we are. We're
Yeah.
pioneers in growing seaweed in North America.
Right. And then you have a beautiful virtual background.
My
Looks like
virtual background is actually one of our farms.
Oh, really?
Danvers Island. Yeah, if you look very
So
closely.
are you growing the seaweed in the lake, not in the sea?
No, that's an ocean. We have tens of thousands of kilometers of shoreline in British Columbia, and you can see one of our floats right there. And yeah, they're close to shore. And that's just
Beautiful.
the water.
A lot of
sometimes
trees.
lot of trees and not many people.
Yes. Very different, right? When we think about the sea and ocean, we can see, quickly imagine the sea sands on the seashore, right?
Yeah.
But you have a lot of, I thought it is a mountain and you have a lake inside the mountain.
No, there's mountains and there's trees. And I got to tell you, some of the days we work on the farm, we see eagles and whales. Sometimes when we go out to the farm, we see bears. And that's important for North American seaweed. It's growing in waters that are very, very pristine and clean. There's not very much industrial activity. So it keeps the water quality clean, and subsequently the seaweed is great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I guess. Yeah.
Sure. One of our primary uses for seaweed is food, and folks like to eat food that comes from a clean environment. We have it tested for any kind of contaminant, and we eat it right out of the water as it's growing to test it, and it's really good.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I saw that you have very interesting background. I thought you're a cowboy, right? In the gold mine. And then tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to founding Cascadia Seaweed.
Cascadia Seaweed. And Cascadia is the region encompassing British Columbia and Washington State, named for a range of mountains. So the Pacific Northwest, kind of where the US and Canada meets, they're called the Cascadia region. I've been in business for about 40 years, always with the sea. I was in the Canadian Navy for a number of decades. And when I finished with the Navy and got into entrepreneurial activities, I was doing some shipbuilding and ship repair and some liquid natural gas projects, a lot of stuff to do with floating structures, a very short detour in the not-for-profit in pollution and solving pollution problems with gold mining. And then 3 years ago, I met my business partner. We had been friends from before. And in 2018, we started talking about Cascadia Seaweed. And in 2019, we incorporated our company.
It feels like you're a very adventurous person. And then if you have an interesting idea, you just execute it, whatever it is, right?
Well, me and several million other entrepreneurs as well. We look and see an opportunity and put a couple of things together and say, I think there's a business case there, and off we go.
Yes, that's yes or no, because I interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs on my platform, also throughout my previous professional life. I met with the thousands of the entrepreneurs, right? And then I discussed business opportunity with them. But yes, a lot of entrepreneurs, they came up with a lot of interesting business idea, but not many people who can actually execute and then grow the business. That's a very different, right? There are a lot of ideas. Right?
Sure, a lot of ideas. And we did a study. Two things came out when we initially looked at the business. The first one is that globally, demand exceeds supply for seaweed. And the second one was very important, and it was a World Bank document that said in the next 25 years, at least 10% of our global food mass should come from seaweed. And in North America, that percentage
That's
was
an interesting
probably
number. Very interesting number. I thought it's I'm Asian, so I thought we are the only people who consume the seaweed, because you guys in the Western world call it the seaweed, right?
yeah,
So to
yes.
something to throw away.
Yeah. Well, the most North Americans think of seaweed as something that's maybe slimy or slippery
Right.
or delicious in Asian food, and they don't really see it in North American food. And there's a saying I use a lot, which actually works now. They walk along a beach and they see seaweed and they go, "Oh, it's all smelly and gross." And I say, yeah, if you leave a bag of carrots on the beach for 2 weeks, it's not going to look very good either. But seaweed, when it comes out of the water and it's freshly harvested, it's delicious. It's full of good nutritional components. So that usually they understand it.
Yeah, I agree. Because I have consumed a variety of the seaweeds all throughout my life. They have all different tastes, and then there are a lot of ways to cook and then consume. Yeah, but the people in the Western Europe and US, I can imagine they are familiar with the nori, right? It's for the
Yes.
sushi stuff.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Well,
the only thing they can remember, right?
There's also a big snack component, and we get these dried nori sheets in little plastic boxes, and kids love it. It's a crunchy, delicious little product, nori snack sheets. And that's one of our first consumer packaged good food products, is a product just like that. We're not going to make it out of nori. We're going to make it out of some of our local brown seaweed, sugar kelp, which is very similar to kombu, and alaria, which is very similar to wakame. And that's the two products that we're putting into our snack sheets. And we have a third one, a red seaweed called dulse or palmaria, and that will be part of it as well. It's very high in protein. And in North Americans, the diets are changing to a lot of plant-based food, and they like high protein quality nutrition, which is why we think there's a really big market for seaweed to fill that opportunity.
Yeah, I can imagine. First step is for you to do is to educate consumer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Spread the story of the benefit, huge benefit of consuming the seaweed in the market.
Yeah, and it's really picked up a lot of steam. The other thing in North America is something called the blue economy, and folks are looking at the oceans and ways to sustainably attract value from the sea, whether it's wind power or sustainable fisheries or seaweed. There's a lot of interest in the blue economy, and that's helped us grow and helped us to continue to be successful as well.
I see. Got you. So you briefly explain how, your plan to process it into a food or a snack or using the seaweed. But can you tell us a little bit about the product are you going to develop there from the seaweed farming? Yeah.
So it's important to note that in British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada, there's 630 native species of seaweed. And in fact, nori grows here naturally as well. There are folks that have very small businesses and they just harvest the natural seaweed. But as you know, what Mother Nature provides can vary from year to year, and there's no reliable scaling of it. So we cultivate seaweed. We put farms in the water, much like it is in Asia. We put seeds on the line and we grow crops. We've picked some crops that are easy to cultivate, sugar kelp, alaria, dulse, and soon nori. And we set off the company by saying, let's just grow it and we'll figure out what the use is afterwards. We looked at the market, and as your listeners will know, there's 11 or 12 different verticals for seaweed, everything from food to pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals to packaging, extracts for chemicals, just many, many things. And of course, if a company tries to do everything, they'll fail. So we focused on the fastest path to revenue, which was consumer packaged goods. And as I mentioned earlier, in North America, plant-based foods are important. Folks want healthy, delicious snacks that they can eat morning, noon, at night, at home or on the go. So we did some market research on what the North American diet really needs. And it was things like the snack sheets that I talked about, jerky, which is a type of, it's not big in Asia, but meat, chewy meat that comes in a package and people eat it like potato chips. It's called jerky. So we're making a seaweed jerky. and protein chips. Those are the first products. But then we're also doing things like product development to mix 50% salmon, 50% seaweed in a burger, or frozen seaweed cubes that you put in a smoothie in the morning and you put it in the blender with some other stuff, some fruit, some protein, and you drink it, and it's a really healthy source. So we focused on farming, and we focused on landing the seaweed and blanching and freezing it. And then we work with co-packers, folks that are already in the business of making bars or making crackers or making chips, and we get them to package the product for us. We've spent a lot of time and effort on the brand. Our food brand is called Cove, K-O-V-E, which is like the cove behind me, an ocean cove. And it presents a really lovely image of the wild, clean west coast of Canada, birds and eagles and whales. And it reflects the very clean water in which the seaweed grows. And consumers have a good feeling eating something that's natural and comes from the sea. So that's the path to market. We're launching our brand officially next Thursday. We're hosting a global event called Seaweed Days, which is online, and we've got participants from all over the world. We're going to launch our brand next Thursday, and then the first products will be available in a couple of months. And the pandemic has changed our launch. We're going to go direct to consumer, so people can go onto the website, log in, order products, pay for it, and we ship to their homes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, after I heard from you about your product and then the branding marketing strategy, I can feel that you have understand your consumer and the market much better than the Asian as compared to the Asian competitor, right? They know how to grow. They have they farmed hundreds of years in Asia. Problem is they don't understand the consumer in the North America, right?
Well, that's correct. The two largest Asian seaweed products in North America, one is the nori snack sheets that I talked about, and the other is a wet Japanese style salad based on wakame. And they're still essentially niche products. Our job is to turn them into mainstream North American consumer products. So we worked with a branding company, a marketing firm in Vancouver, in Canada, and did a deep dive on what the consumer wants, what the consumer values, and we've built our brand to meet known demands.
Got you. So seaweed, as we talk about it in Asia, I don't remember all different names of seaweed in Asia, but I consume them because we use it as you call it the wakame. We use it for the salad, and then we put it in the soup or a lot of different way we consume the seaweed. But what kind of seaweed are you plan to grow in your farm?
Right. So brown seaweeds like kombu, alaria, which is like wakame, eventually the nori. The dulse is like some of the red seaweeds, not Ascophyllum, Chondus crispus. That's a seaweed that's very popular in Japan. And interestingly enough, there's a big company on the east coast of Canada, and their largest client is Japan, and they sell dehydrated salad. So the consumer there takes some salad out of a bag, which can sit on a shelf, puts it in water, it rehydrates, and they make it in their salad. So we said, that's something North Americans would like to see as well. So we're going to be doing a dehydrated salad. Let me just talk about that for a sec. If you dried your lettuce or your kale or your green vegetable at home, when you add water to it, it's going to be pretty bad. It's going to be limp. But because seaweed grows in the environment, and twice a day, because of the tides and the wind, it could be out of the water and in the water and out of the water and in the water. Seaweed doesn't mind it if you dry it and rehydrate it. So this is a product that we're going to be adding as well. And as I said, I think there'll be a lot of consumer acceptance. But I have to add, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later, we also have 3 other verticals that we're looking at on how we're going to sell our seaweed. But certainly the first is consumer packaged goods for plant-based food.
Yes, that's a fast way to sell the product. And
it is.
Yeah. What else do you have? What kind of the business
so the other
idea?
The other verticals, and they're more than ideas. They're paths that we're very strongly pursuing. One of them is nutraceuticals or dietary supplements. In Japan, for example, lots of folks take tablets with fucoidan in it. And if fucoidan comes from a brown seaweed, and our brown seaweed has a lot of fucoidan in it. There's iodine tablets. Seaweed contains more calcium than milk, more potassium than bananas. So just drying seaweed and turning it into a nutritious powder is a great way. So we're going to have a line of nutraceuticals, and again, introduce this to North Americans as a dietary supplement. The other thing is, of course, everyone in the world is worried about climate change. And two components to global warming, one is methane and one is carbon dioxide. One of the biggest sources of methane pollution is from cows, cow burps. And there are seaweeds that you can add to a cow's diet, 1% of a cow's feed with seaweed, and it reduces the methane gas that a cow produces by 90%. So a tiny amount,
90%, not
90%.
19%.
90. So a
Wow,
small amount of seaweed.
That's wow. I mean,
the-
they use a huge solution.
It does another thing, though. It also means that the cow grows faster because it's not wasting energy making gas. It's using its energy to become bigger and better. And the third benefit of it is it makes the meat tastier and it makes the milk tastier. The fourth benefit is that the farmer then uses less land crops to feed the cow. Now, we all know when seaweed grows in the ocean, the only two ingredients are sunlight and seawater. The ocean is full of nutrients and it gets all the energy from the sun. So you don't have to fertilize it.
Productivity and conversion ratio, right? Good conversion
don't have ratio. You don't have to fertilize it. You don't have to irrigate it. And the fifth benefit, besides the fact that the cow grows faster, is that as seaweed grows itself, it sequesters carbon. Growing seaweed sequesters more carbon than the same weight of trees. So we're sequestering carbon, we're using less land, the cow is gaining weight faster, it's not producing methane, and it is a better product.
Yes.
So that's the third vertical. And the fourth vertical is...
You have another vertical. Yeah.
One last one.
Okay.
You can make plastic-like products from seaweed. In the brown seaweed, there's a substance in it called alginate, and you can make a plastic-like substance from seaweed. And in fact, there's companies making straws out of it and plastic bags and things like that. Right. So we're making...
Straw is a huge problem now, right? Plastic straw. Yeah.
So we're going to make the plastic out of seaweed. Now, where does most of the world's bad plastic end up? In the ocean. So we have a tagline, and it's trademarked, and it's called Oceans Saving Oceans. So if you can get seaweed and make plastic from the ocean, then you're going to put less of the bad plastic back in the ocean. So it's Oceans Saving Oceans. That's our fourth vertical. There's many others. We're not focusing on them. As you said earlier.
Four, I think, we
well,
on this stage.
It is.
It is a huge I mean, if you can find a way to, make it commercially acceptable to the consumer buyer, I think that is a really huge market, I guess. Yeah,
it is a huge market. It's interesting, David. In the States, they're looking at using seaweed for biofuel, just like ethanol comes from corn. People are looking at seaweed because you can convert that to fuel. We personally don't think that's a good idea for this company.
I heard that idea a lot from the other entrepreneurs. In fact,
we're not looking at it because I think the renewable fuels need to be the wind, wave power, running water, things like that. There's a lot of other ways you can make green energy. So we're not looking at green energy at all. We're looking at food and nutraceuticals, bovine feed, and bioplastics.
Yeah, very interesting idea. It's a fascinating idea. In fact, I lived in Asia. Many decades here, and then as an Asian food culture, I always consumed the seaweed, a very different kind of the seaweed. But I never imagined about the way you just described to consume the more creative way to also solve a lot of problems, right? That's
right.
A brilliant idea. Yeah.
We've hired some very famous chefs, or famous in North America, and said, here's some raw seaweed. What kind of products can you make out of it that the North American consumer will like? And we had things like I mentioned before, 50-50 burgers, where it's half meat, half seaweed, or half fish, half seaweed. They use lasagna and they mix leaves of pasta and seaweed. We had a special seasoning spice. As you know, there's 5 flavor groups, and the 5th flavor group is called umami, which is like MSG, and it's a natural flavor that comes from seaweed. If you want to eat healthier and more naturally,
Umami.
seaweed,
Yes.
umami,
Yes.
seaweed is the solution.
Okay. That's interesting. We are Asian and crazy about the umami, right?
Yeah.
Coming from the beef and seafood and
Yes.
yeah, we are crazy about that taste.
And seaweed is a natural umami. So we're going to be doing Cascadia Seaweed all flavor spice. And it's a shaker you can put on your meats and your pastas and your potatoes, and it'll have seaweed flakes in it, and it'll impart that umami taste in the food.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
In Asia, especially in Korea, after the woman give birth to a baby, as a tradition, they consume the seaweed soup many weeks. So they don't eat anything else. That's the seaweed soup. I mean, based on the tradition, they believe that it is a very nutritious.
It is.
To help the mother to recover from the giving birth to a baby. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've done some chemical analysis of what's in seaweed, the polysaccharides, the minerals, the compounds, the elements, the iodine that we talked about. And, you know, seaweed, I think, was the first living algae, single-celled algae was one of the first living things on the planet Earth about 4 million years ago. And it's just evolved and evolved and evolved. And people don't realize actually how important it is for us. Industrial uses of seaweed with carrageenan and agar-agar, it's for making ice cream and thickeners and colorants, you know, food coloring. It forms so many of our products. What is new to the North American market is seaweed that looks like seaweed. You know, if it's a flavor or a thickener, you never see it, but you put it on a plate and you go, ah, what's that? Seaweed. We had a really good experience, actually 2 times when we've introduced a set of partners. And we had a gentleman from Japan out to one of our farms. Now, he's in the seafood business. He's Japanese. He eats seaweed all his life. We took him out to one of our farms and we pulled up our rope and we broke off a piece of seaweed, shook off the salt water, and he took a bite of it. And we just sat there and he looks at us and he goes, wow, that's really good. And it's like, all right. You know?
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know, one of the components I haven't talked about, which is important, and you highlighted the trees and the forests, all along the coast of British Columbia are the Indigenous or the First Nations people. And they were the folks that lived on the coast and in Canada before there were any settlers or any folks coming from Europe. And they're there to this day. They live in their own thriving communities. They're integrated and fully part of society. But because they've lived along the ocean for thousands and thousands of years, we always partner with the local Indigenous or First Nations communities from the northern edge of Canada, right at the Alaskan border, right to the southern tip of Canada. And they really bring a lot of value to our partnerships as well. We work with them. They have their communities and their cities right near the water. And it's an important part of our business as well. So we're just not a bunch of entrepreneurs. We're a bunch of entrepreneurs that also integrate with local coastal and First Nations communities. And that makes us a stronger company. The other thing to note, in British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada, it's about $1.3 billion a year in finfish and shellfish. So salmon and halibut and things like that. We think that we're the third leg of the aquaculture triangle. So finfish, shellfish, and seaweed. And that's been part of the journey that we've been on for 3 years, is to educate the government, the public, and the consumer that things that come from the sea aren't just the things that swim or live in shells. The plants, which for us is the seaweed, is also a very, very valuable part of aquaculture, part of our diets, and part of coastal industry.
Yeah, I can imagine, because Canada has a huge land like US and China, and is surrounded by sea. You have, I mean, huge resources for the seafood, right? That's easy to understand. But how come I haven't seen the seafood imported from Canada in Asia?
You will have seen British Columbia salmon for sure. Salmon is a
salmon,
big
maybe,
industry.
yes.
Yeah,
but
salmon.
Yeah, really.
And halibut, certainly oysters and gooey ducks and mussels. They're big export products, but not seaweed. And we haven't really targeted Asia or even thought about Asia as a market for Canadian seaweed because so much of it is grown. I think something like 99% of the world's seaweed is growing in China. But to get it from China to Canada, of course, you'd have to ship it. And seaweed is 90% water. So if you're shipping fresh seaweed from Asia to Canada, 90% of what you're shipping is just water. So for us, we've focused on growing it in the clean, pristine waters of British Columbia, and then selling it mainly into North America because the shipping costs and distances are much, much closer.
It makes sense. I agree. Yeah, but in a way, I mean, in the long term, if you plan to export the seaweed to the Asia, I heard that you said that it contains a lot of water, but for Asian people to consume the seaweed is dried, so
Yes.
it is not heavy at all because my family, they send the seaweed from Korea, or
Yes.
so it's a very light. In fact, they dried it very, very hard.
Yep, you're absolutely correct, and that's not to say we wouldn't sell seaweed to Asia, because the brand and the image of Canada is clean and just. This is not a Zoom background. This is a picture of one of our farms. And these are the kind of waters we work in. It's just beautiful. And if you bring that as part of your brand messaging to the consumer, they can say, oh, I want some of that Canadian seaweed because look where it's growing. So that's an area we could look into, but you've already highlighted that you don't want to get into too many things right away because you can't be good at 13 things. So we're going to be good at 4 things. And one of our targets.
And then you understand the consumer in North America much better than Asian, right?
Absolutely. So, yep. And our goal is to become North America's largest ocean cultivator of seaweed. And we're pretty close there. We are going to have 120 kilometers of seeded line in the water this fall. And that will probably put us to becoming the largest grower of seaweed in North America. Because we set an aggressive path. We have a very strong management team. We're very disciplined in our execution, and we set that as an early goal. And I'm fairly certain we're going to achieve it.
Gotcha. What is the next step? You have on top of your mind, and then your long-term vision with the company.
So as you know, and I'm sure you've talked to all your entrepreneurs, we're a startup. We're edging into year 3. And it's important, first of all, to make sure that your cash flow will sustain you to the next major milestone, your burn rate, to ensure that you're bringing in money as much as you're going out. So we still are attracting investment and partnerships with larger companies. The launch of our product over the next couple of months, very important. In the fall, we're going to be making some important announcements and product development with the cow feed, the bovine feed for reducing methane, but also seaweed as a feed ingredient for fish farms. As you know, there's lots of fish farms, both on land and in the water, and you have to feed the fish something natural. So that could form a part of us. And then the next big step is just continued disciplined growth. We've tested everything once in concept. We've tested everything twice in prototype, and now it's time to commercially scale.
Yeah, very interesting idea, and then brilliant idea, because I'm familiar with the seaweed all the time in Asia, but we never thought about the using or the making product out of seaweed in a way you just described. Also, the North America is, unexplored market. They haven't consumed the seaweed, so you have a huge mission. It might be challenging in the beginning, but a very meaningful mission. You educate them, and then you introduce all the benefit of seaweed to the consumer in North America, and then you grow the business from there. A very brilliant idea.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, and it's fun to talk about seaweed. People ask me on the street, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a seaweed farmer," and they stop because it's not very common now. But David, something's very interesting. The speed of adaptation of ocean industries in North America and Europe and Asia is blisteringly fast right now. And I've watched a lot of trends over my career, all of my careers, 40 years worth of work. And I don't think I've found a sector that's growing, maybe Bitcoin, I don't know, but I haven't seen a sector growing as fast as blue ocean, blue economy strategies. And if you're growing a crop that sequesters carbon, uptakes excess nutrients, reduces ocean acidification, and creates habitat as you grow a product. You've got a lot of attention, and we're working with the World Wildlife Fund. We're working with the World Economic Forum. We're working with something called Oceans 2050 out of Europe, which is Alexandre Cousteau, Jacques Cousteau, the famous ocean explorer's granddaughter. So we're part of a lot of these groups now that are saying, wait a minute, we can use the ocean, but we've got to use it in a responsible way. And by using it in a responsible way, not only do we have really solid, profitable economy, we're also working on the problems of climate change. And we're right at ground zero for that. So it's pretty exciting. I don't think there's ever been a boring day in the last few years when we started the business.
Yeah, very, very interesting and ambitious plan.
It is. You need big targets.
Yeah. Okay, I think I finished all the questions. So thank you so much for the taking time and then sharing the ambitious venture project. I'm looking for another exciting story from your venture.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, David, for letting me talk about Cascadia seaweed and talking about the benefits of growing seaweed in the ocean off the west coast of Canada, British Columbia, Vancouver Island, and sharing our story with you. Thanks very much for your interest. And I hope this is of value to your viewers and listeners.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.